Good morning and welcome to Utah Matters. I'm Dean Painter. We hope you've had a wonderful Days of 47 weekend, a time when we celebrate, we recognize, we honor those who came before us to settle this very unusual community. As we zip by in our freeways and our airports and our rails, we wonder how it was, how we can comprehend that all those thousands of pioneers walked the 1,400 miles to make it here to the Great Salt Lake Valley. We wonder, even maybe more incomprehensibly, why someone would want to do that now. Well, my guest on Utah Matters today is someone who has his reasons, and he's written a book about it. We welcome Lynn, Doc Cleland. You go by Doc, Lynn?
I do.
And Doc has written a book based on his experience, Faith Greater Than Pain, the real-life story of one man, 2 feet, and 1,400 miles. Doc, good to have you with us.
Thank you.
And we should mention where we're at right here.
We're in Mormon Flats.
Where is Mormon Flats?
Mormon Flats is the beginning of the ascent as they go over Big Mountain. It's about a 4.5 mile trek. This is the steepest part of the entire trail right where we're at. But this is where they would have camped for their last day before they decided to gather up and do this push. There were, in fact, women that had written in their journals that they stood here and cried. They looked at that mountain and went, how are we going to do after all that we've gone through? How are we going to get over that mountain?
4 miles from here, you go up the trail and you can finally see from Big Mountain into the Great Salt Lake Valley.
You get up on the top of Big Mountain and it's a 1,400-foot rise. That's steep in 4 miles. And, walking it is one thing, pulling a handcart is another, or even getting oxen and wagons up that. If you've never walked it, go walk 4 miles and you'll get a better appreciation of what they went through.
Yeah. This trail was cut by the Donner Party a year before the Mormons arrived, Brigham Young and the Mormons arrived.
It was. 1846, they had to plow their own way through, and so it took them quite a while.
Yeah. The book is about your experience and about the experience of your great-great-grandmother, I guess it is?
4 greats, yes.
Sarah Good Marshall.
Yes.
You've used her experience to explain why you've had your experience. Set us up, tell us who Sarah Good Marshall is.
Sarah Good Marshall is the very first person that entered the Salt Lake Valley from all of the handcarters. She was number 1. She never got any accolades for that, and I'm sure that she wasn't looking for that. She just wanted to get to town. But as the first and second handcart companies waited at the bottom of Dell Reservoir, which wasn't the reservoir at that time before they went over, she had a little 4-year-old boy, in fact, that she had to get into the valley to try and save his life. He was not doing very well. And so she takes off and climbs that climb on her own, which, again, go stand at the bottom of Dell Reservoir, look to the top of where you go up over Immigration Canyon. I couldn't do it. I have no idea how they got all that energy to be able to pull up over that.
She had 3, 4 other children? 5?
6 children.
6 total children.
2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12 years old.
She was by herself.
By herself.
Why was she by herself?
When she was over in England, she had listened to the Mormon missionaries, and her husband was an abusive alcoholic man, and he was beating her quite regularly and quite publicly.
Tried to kill her.
Tried to kill her. Eventually one day he goes to poison her, unknowns to her, puts poison in her cup of tea, and he had also a cup of tea, so he's going to poison her. He turns his back for a moment, and as she goes to reach for it, she gets this prompting of, oh, don't take that one, take the other one. So she does, not knowing what that's all about, drinks his cup. As he comes back, he drinks his own poison by accident and kills himself. What? And as that all unfolds, you have to put yourself in her mind to think, my husband really tried to take my life? The children that we have together tried to take my life because I wanted to become a Mormon.
And she wants to come west. She gets on a ship.
She does. She gets the charge by the prophet and the missionaries over there to come join them in Zion. And so she travels to Liverpool, gets on a ship, Samuel S. Curling, spends 5 weeks on the ocean out there.
Brings her sister, is that right?
Brings her sister's 25 years old with her, and the 6 children, and then they get on a train. I call it a train, but basically it was just a boxcar with benches in it. Oh, it wasn't what you see in the Western movies. And they travel 5 days to Iowa City, because that's where the railroad ends, in fact. And then from there, they pick up a handcart and walk the remaining miles.
And the captain, as they she begins this adventure to the Great Salt Lake Valley, the captain doesn't want to take her.
No, you have to kind of put yourself in Edmund Ellsworth's position that he already has 5 single sisters at the time that my grandmother steps up to him and goes, "I'd like to join your handcart company." She says, "I just feel impressed that I'd like to be on the very first one, to be able to get out there and get this done." And he says, "So where's your husband?" "Don't have a husband, I'm widowed." He says, "Whoa, you'll only be a hindrance to my company. You need to stay here and find yourself a husband first." He says, "You can't come." "Really? I've come from England and you could tell me I can't come?" She says, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll walk behind you and I'll beat you there." And then they acquiesced and he says, "Okay, you'll come, but I don't have anybody to really help you." "That's all right, I'll take care of myself." And that's exactly what she did. She was last in line.
In the book, you have quite an elegant narrative of what she was saying or what was happening to her. How did that develop? Where did that come from as she was on the trail?
Well, she has written a number of, well, she wrote a journal entry about 20 years after the fact that she actually recounts to her granddaughter of what took place. So that gives us our basis of what happened.
Gotcha. And you used this as you started out. Tell us why you got interested in following her footsteps.
Well, I'm good friends with Dan Haggerty, who's Grizzly Adams, and he encouraged me.
The old TV show.
The old TV show,
Yeah.
yeah. So I suppose the younger folks wouldn't even know who Grizzly Adams is. So I have the Grizzly Adams beard, right?
Yeah, you look good.
And so he said he heard the story about my grandmother as I told him that. And he says, "We ought to make a movie about that." And I said, "We just don't have enough information." And he says, "Well, why don't we go walk the trail?" And I said, "Okay, let's go do that." Well, he backed out. He couldn't because he's got a bum leg. And so I ended up having this, all of a sudden from that moment that I decided that that's what I needed to do to get more information about this, I had this strong push and urge to be able to do it exactly as they did it so I could experience the trials and trauma that they went through. First of all, I did it to honor my grandmother. Second was the trials and trauma, because you can't really understand that unless you eat like they ate, have an original handcart like they would have had, and also I wanted to be able to teach a little religious tolerance as I walked across. So that was my 3 reasons.
You also had some other things going on personally in your life that made it opportune for you to do it at this time. What was going on?
I'd lost my wife 13 years before that. At 47 years old, that's a difficult thing to happen. My life was kind of upside down at that point. Couldn't make my life work very well at that time. I lost my house, sold it, and then I was working as a video engineer. I ended up, that job kind of disappeared because of the economy. And so there was an open void for me to be able to kind of fill with this dream all of a sudden that I'd come up with. I didn't have this all my life. It's all of a sudden just like appeared. And so I thought, this is crazy. I have a double groin hernia, rheumatoid arthritis, and a herniated disc in my back. And I'm going to go do what? And I'll be 60 years old out on the trail. But I thought, if you're going to do this, you need to do it like they would have. You get up off the couch and you go do it. They didn't train. They didn't hike the hills. They didn't go get protein. They got up and left. And you pay for that. You really pay for it, especially as older you get. Oh, you hurt every day.
But you think, before you get out on the trail, you think, I can walk. Who can't walk? I mean, can walk if I take my time and I do it,
Sure.
I measure it. Yep. Anyone can walk,
Yep.
but it wasn't what you expected.
No, in fact, walking, I could walk it again probably at my age now, 65. But it's pulling this 217 pounds. That's the difference.
Tell us how you got outfitted.
Yeah, because I wanted to do it exactly as they did it. I had Steve Pratt of Pratt Wagon Works actually do the wheels. These are handmade wheels. They're artisan wheels. They're just wonderful. And he made the axle and the wheels. And then I had a wonderful fellow in my church, my ward. He also helped me build the box. He was a furniture maker, and so it was nice and solid. But we made it to the specifications that they would have in 1857, which is the year after the very first handcart company. This is a bigger one and stronger one that they actually took back east instead of what the pioneers brought back west.
And you mentioned in 1856, which of course was the year of the ill-fated handcart companies of Willie and Martin,
Right.
that their handcarts were much lighter and much more prone to
Right.
collapse.
Theirs weighed between 60 and 65 pounds. This weighs 217 empty. And then they would put as many as 5 adults per handcart, and they would allow them to bring 17 pounds. You start your life over with 17 pounds, that's it. Pick 17 pounds in your home sometime and go, okay, this is really important. I know what's coming up. I'm going to take this and this and this. It's tough. And so 5 adults, 17 pounds apiece, that's 85 pounds. 85 and 65 is 150. That's what they thought you could pull across America. That's why you get this odd number of 17.
She's going to, Sarah Good Marshall, your great-great-grandmother, she's going to pull this herself. She doesn't really have help from the children
Correct.
to speak of. In fact, she might be carrying some of them in the cart.
That's correct.
Often. So you're loaded up, you're in Iowa City, you've got all the food you could ever imagine. Actually, what do you have for food?
I have exactly what they would have taken. Which my portion for 2 cups a day ended up to be about 80 pounds of flour. I'm not a cook, I'm not a baker. I didn't know what to do with this 80 pounds of flour. And I had my chase vehicle, I had a wonderful lady there that helped me make it into basically a Dutch oven brick about so deep. And that was what you had each day. You'd break off a third of that, stick it in your pocket, and that's lunch.
That's
and
lunch.
Dinner
And breakfast.
And you go, pretty soon you can't eat it anymore. You just can't put another piece of bread in your face.
You had a chase vehicle you just mentioned, and that's pretty much demanded by law to go on certain places.
Yeah, secondary roads I had to have by law. Someone behind me with signage and all of that, but there were certain areas when I was actually on 2-rut dirt trail where they weren't allowed to come. And so I would end up walking by myself for some periods of time by myself.
Well, Lynn is all loaded up. He's in Iowa City, Iowa, and headed for the Valley of the Great Salt Lake, 1,400 miles away. And we get into the trek. We'll be back on Utah Matters to talk about this. It's a very interesting, exciting time when we come back. Welcome back to Utah Matters. The book Faith Greater Than Pain is a book written based on the experiences of Lynn Cleland, who walked from Iowa City, Iowa to the Great Salt Lake Valley pulling a handcart to honor his grandmother, Sarah Good Marshall, who made that trek in 1856 with 6 children and a 6th sister. Well, we got you all loaded up and we're ready to go from Iowa City. Tell us what your first day was like and how that related to any other day.
I wanted to quit.
First day.
I'd already been given the excuses by my brother and my kids and everybody else. Hey, do the best you can. If you don't make it, it's okay. So that sits in the back of your brain when you can't even get down the road. And the handcart was swollen up. It had been in the rain and the moisture. The wheels were all locked up and it just wasn't moving. It was squealing and I thought, really? This is what it's going to be like?
First day.
First day. And at the end of the first day, I thought, didn't realize it, but I thought, oh, my fingers are numb. I was getting carpal tunnel because your hand flexes on that handle 30 to 50,000 times a day. Pretty soon your hands go numb. And they go, pioneers back then went, I don't know, can't feel my hands. They didn't know what it was. Me, I go, I got carpal tunnel from pulling this. So it was like from the very first day, and then blisters started. It was miserable. And I tell in my voice notes, because I had a voice recorder to be able to record every emotion and everything, because that's what I wanted to be able to do. I wanted to understand what it took in here and in here to be able to get down from this point to that point. I want to know the emotion, the psychology of it. Because in 1856, their journal entries were traveled 12 miles, found wood, found water, so-and-so died. Tell me what it was like.
Yeah.
I don't want the stats. I want to know what it was like. So I recorded everything, and I tell it's just like, this stinks.
And the next day, any better?
No. Eventually, as I walked through Iowa was the physical side of getting adjusted to it. I lost 48 pounds in 110 days. And of the 48 pounds, I lost 23 of them in the first 24 days. Just walking those long rolling hills in Iowa. Whoever said Iowa is flat has never walked Iowa.
You counted 48 hills in 2 days.
81 hills in
81.
81 hills in 2 days. And why do I know 81? Because you have nothing but your thoughts all day long. You have your thoughts for 110 days. There's no one to talk to. There's no radio, there's no newspaper, there's no nothing. It's your own thoughts for 110 days.
Now, how much of this are you on a road where you're seeing people zip by, and how much are you on a trail that's a little bit more isolated?
I walk the trail as close as possible without walking on private property. So especially in Iowa, I'm on country dirt roads that parallel it. You have to understand that the Mormon Trail back then would snake through the bottom, the lowest point of least resistance, until they had to get up on top, and then they would stay on top. So it does one of these snaking things. Well, now that property has been sectioned off, I had to do all of these section things. So sometimes I would be on it, and sometimes I'd be maybe a mile from it. And so it was nice to be able to walk on original 2-rut dirt trail.
But in some ways, you're going more up and down than they did. It's a little more
Always.
difficult.
Yeah, because there, when I'd walk at the bottom of a canyon, I go, there goes the trail, and I have to climb the top of it again. So 81 of those hills in 2 days. The second day is 23 miles of them. You just can't see another hill. It's just like your clothes are soaked. I would drink as much as 2 gallons of water and would never go to the bathroom hardly at all. Wow. Just because it all comes out through your skin, just drenched from pulling it's my wooden anchor. Yeah. This is tough, pulling, you can walk it, but pull 217 pounds over it. And I just felt like an ox. I did. It's just like a Hollywood movie, just barely sticking one foot in front of the other.
I asked you beforehand what was your toughest day, and which day did you feel like you really wanted to quit? And you said?
The first.
The first. and you said almost every day.
Yeah, after that, yeah. It really didn't get a lot better. You just knew you had to stay into it. A lot of work had gotten into this, and I seemed like to not only that physically, emotionally, but I had a spiritual drive that I wanted to be able to accomplish what she had accomplished. And if you want to understand what they went through, you got to suffer. So if you're not suffering, you don't understand. You don't get it. You just go out there for a walk.
Do you suppose that was the purpose of how, if you're a faithful member of the Mormon Church and you read about or you experience that was part of the gleaning?
It was.
Yeah.
It was. In fact, in my grandmother's conversations in her journal, she says that in fact that those that lived had it harder sometimes than those that died. There are those that walked this trail that walked right by us here that died within a couple of days after getting into the Salt Lake Valley. Archer Walters, he's in the first handcart company. He repairs all the handcarts. He makes all the coffins for everybody, and he's dead within a few days after arriving in Salt Lake Valley. What an amazing man.
One of the things you set out to do as you were walking was to talk to people, especially people of other faiths, get to know them and maybe chat with them. Tell us how some of those conversations developed.
I tried to, because I wanted company.
Yeah.
Anywhere I was at, walking through an area of a town or something, if I was camped out overnight, I'd say, come walk with me in the morning. And I'm just trying to convince somebody to come walk a little bit with me so I could have a conversation. And it would happen sometimes. I probably had as many as 20 people that walked with me of different religions. It was my third goal was to try and teach religious tolerance amongst all religions in the United States. And I walked with a lot of free evangelists in the Midwest. I walked with Catholics. There was quite a few different religions. It was wonderful. And then they would ask me, of course, Mormon questions. How many wives do you have? And so we'd get into that and we'd tell them that isn't how it is. But that's what a lot of people think. But we had these wonderful conversations about our kids, and some would walk with me all day and some would walk one block. I even had one lady that walked with me that was, I think she was 88 years old. Walked with me a quarter of a mile. She was tough.
How did you feel about those conversations?
What
did you feel like you accomplished?
Oh, it was great. It really was. I mean, I'm doing something historic, and so I wanted them to be part of it. I wanted them to understand what this is all about. And I think when they first met me, they thought, this is just a Mormon thing. And I tried to tell them, this isn't a Mormon thing. 400,000 people walked this piece of dirt that we're on. 400,000. And especially like in 1852, 40,000 people that year walked that trail. It's a dirt superhighway. It wasn't just the Mormons. This is people going out there for their dreams.
You state that you almost died 3 times.
3 times.
And let's take a little look at something you're describing here about your leg. This is where?
This is in just before Scottsbluff, Nebraska. It's a chigger infestation.
Okay.
We have a medical emergency we're trying to take care of. I got infested with chigger bites like you wouldn't believe about 4 or 5 days ago, and they've gotten worse. And then the medicine that I went to see a doctor at a hospital he gave me, I was allergic to. I now have a staph infection, and my leg is all swollen up.
That's not a pretty sight.
No, in fact, I thought really that, because I know about necrotizing fasciitis, it's the flesh-eating bacteria, where it typically will take your life in a very short period of time, or they'll start chopping off limbs to save your life. I survived it. It was not necrotizing fasciitis, but it ended up being a staph infection from an adverse reaction to some drugs that they gave me to put on it, and it caused this staph reaction. And so I survived it, but it was difficult. I thought, oh, I'm going to be dead in just a short period of time. It's very fearful. In fact, they were going to life flight me in. That's how serious it was. I went, whoa, life flight, really? I can't
Price
afford.
just went up.
I can't afford that. Plus, I don't know that I want to go on a life flight.
Yeah.
So no, it was tough, but we survived it.
You encountered rattlesnakes and other varmints.
Few rattlesnakes. I think there was only about 3 that I saw out there. The other 2 times that I thought that I was going to lose my life, one was in a tornado in 2:15 in the morning in Colfax, Iowa. It's called a straight line tornado, or a hurricane of the plains. It's a tornado without a vortex. It's an F1. It had already been raining 4 hours, 2 inches in 4 hours it rained. It was just dumping. It had been going on for hours and hours, and I'm out in my tent thinking, I'm going to die out here.
That's a lake.
It's a lake. It was 48 lightning strikes in 60 seconds, I counted.
Gosh.
The only time I can see, because it's in the middle of the night, is when the lightning strikes. And they're hitting all around me, and I'm counting them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I thought, oh, this isn't good. I want to be tough. I want to be like my grandmother. I want to stay out here and survive this. But then I thought, I'm going to get struck by lightning. Then on top of all of that, I hear this rushing wind on top of the wind. They say like a freight train, seriously is, coming down the valley, and here comes this tornado. Collapses me in my tent and rips up everything, and I'm now in my stuffed kite heading for Kansas. I thought, it's going to pick me up and throw me away. I couldn't get out of it because the tent ties, it doesn't have zippers, it ties on the outside and the inside, so it overflaps. So I'm stuck in this thing doing this. I thought, I really was very afraid. I thought, I'm dead. I'm going to get picked up and thrown out. And I finally found an opening and crawled out of that, and then fell on the tent and drug it up to the area where I was at and tipped over a cement statue on it. But then my gallbladder and liver failed from the lack of protein about 300 miles before I got here. And so the lack of protein was a serious issue. I was in such pain. My body was basically eating itself alive. Of the 48 pounds that I lost, 32 of those pounds was muscle. And so the body's starving to death, basically. You're not getting enough calories, and so it's eating itself. And so I had to have, I called the doctor that had been with me in Scotts Bluff, and I told him all the things going on. He says, if that pain becomes upper abdominal and you get a fever, he says, you need to call 911. He says, we need to get a helicopter for you because you're going to be dead soon.
That is a little crazy.
Yeah. So all of these things are the same thing that they would have went through.
Yeah.
That's why we did all of this, so we could understand on a more intimate level what the pioneers went through instead of this journal of found wood, found water. What does it take up here to get down the road? I mean, my grandmother lost 1/3 of her body weight. She's 5'2". 1/3 of her body weight by the time she comes in, and she's not any different than the rest of them. Brigham Young comes up here to meet the handcart pioneers, and he has a speech ready to give to them, and he's in tears and can't. They're so emaciated, so burnt from being out on the trail. He cries and gives the speech much later on.
We're going to talk about the moment when Sarah Good Marshall and when Doc Cleland steps into the Salt Lake Valley. This is Utah Matters. We have just a few minutes left on Utah Matters. We're here at Mormon Flats, about how many miles outside Salt Lake City?
A 2-day walk.
2-day walk, that's how you know it. But we're on the other side, we're on the far side of Big Mountain, and where you can first see the Great Salt Lake Valley. And then I'd describe for us what happens. Everyone wants to go to the end of the book to see what happens at the end. What happens to you when you enter the valley? What happened to Sarah when she entered the valley with her 6 children? And
yeah, her 6 children, of course, the little 4-year-old boy was in trouble. And so they had some friends in the valley, I understand, that they actually were taken in by the friends and were fed and were were given the comforts that they needed.
She was the first handcart.
Very first one. In fact,
Yeah.
she walks in before everybody else. She's on her own. In fact, as she's walking in there, she sees the horses. There's some horses riding fast towards her. She thinks, I've gotten this far, and now I'm going to be attacked by Indians. And so they all huddle underneath the handcart. They're all very afraid. And the horsemen, who are the advance party from Brigham Young, they slow down and go, we see we've scared them. And they come up, and she's relieved to see that it's not Indians. And so she then, they take the little girls that are with them, and they put them on the horses and take them into town. And Sarah then takes the little boy and the 2-year-old and pulls them the rest of the way.
They all lived long lives, it looks like.
They did?
Yeah.
Yeah, they did.
And what about you?
As I came into the valley, I thought, you know, standing at the top of Immigration Canyon, I thought, oh, I'm starved to death. I've lost 48 pounds. That's Christmas. There's all my gifts. All I got to do is go there. And it was overwhelming because I'd been so quiet, so much on my own, nothing but my own thoughts for so long, that when I got into town, it was overwhelming to my senses. All of the music that was blaring, all the traffic, all the people. I'd only been gone almost not quite 4 months, but I had adapted so much to 1856 mentally that it was wonderful to be out here in nature and quiet. And I got there and did my interviews and met my well-wishers and all that, but after that was over, I was depressed. I didn't want to be here. It seemed like everything was gone. It was all over. All my wonderful feelings, all my life-changing experiences were out here. That's where I wanted to be. And I probably didn't say 10 words in 2 days. I was so depressed.
Well, Lynn, Doc Cleland, and this handcart right here went 1,400 miles from Iowa City to the Valley of the Great Salt Lake to reenact and honor his great-grandmother, Sarah Good Marshall. You can learn about his experience. It's a wonderful read. It's called Faith Greater Than Pain. You can get that on Amazon.
Yep.
And Lynn, you're going to be building a documentary that based on a lot of the video that you took along the way.
Yep. We're just about done with that. We're in the editing stage of that, but we have wonderful moments. I mean, there's 110 days worth of stories, of course, but wonderful experiences that I don't, every time I give a talk to the youth or to a church or something, I always say that as I started this, I thought that I was recreating history. As it turns out, history was recreating me. And it just has changed my life forever.
Doc Cleland, thank you so much for
Yes.
sharing those with us.
Absolutely, you're welcome.
And thank you for joining us on this Days of 47 weekend. We look forward to seeing you next week on Utah Matters. Have a great week.